The cold evening air bites into my arms and legs as I stand on our bright, illuminated porch. Police sirens blare in the distance, inching closer by the second. Several armed officers stand in a crescent on our lawn, a handcuffed figure lying before them. Next to me, my mother presses a trembling hand to her face, tears streaming through her fingers. She whimpers, staring at the figure with shock, anger, and fear. Neighbors peek through their blinds, their faces pale in the glow of flashing lights. My life will never be the same after this. Just hours ago, I was your average 21-year-old girl. Friends, dates, movies. Life was pretty normal. I worked at McDonald's to save up for college. My parents could never cover tuition, but if I wanted nice clothes and trendy makeup, I had to earn it. The pay was lousy, but it was better than nothing. When I wasn't at work, I spent all my time on the dark web. I know what you're thinking, but you're wrong. I don't have a criminal bone in my body. I've always been squeamish, so the dark web's gory offerings never appealed to me. I was there for the chat rooms. One in particular, dark web sleuthing, DWL for short. I could spend an entire weekend on that chat room. 60 members, all anonymous, all obsessed with solving crimes and mysteries in our small town. We had assisted in the capture of a burglar, exposed a charity misappropriating funds, and achieved other victories through our internet detective work. Clue on the big one, the message flashed on the chat board. The big one was our town's biggest unsolved crime. In the 90s, a serial killer had terrorized the slums, murdering women no one ever noticed were missing. The public dubbed him the Second Jack. Before he vanished in the early 2000s, 8 sex workers had fallen prey to a sadistic hunger. Messages flew from members in rapid succession. The excitement was contagious. We were about to nail that piece of shit. My heart pounded as I clicked on the video file a member had shared. The video was grainy, but the scene was clear. A man in blue jeans and a trench coat emerged from an alley, his movements jerky and agitated, like he was running away from something. He made a beeline for a white Chevy parked across the street. His face was turned away from the camera, but something about him seemed familiar. He peeled off out of the camera's range, the plates covered by a piece of cardboard, but my eyes lingered to the spiral sticker on the car's trunk. Suddenly it clicked. The blood froze in my veins. A cold sweat broke out all over my body. I recognized that sticker. I recognized that car. And to my horror, I realized I recognized the man in the video. "Sweetheart, are you okay in there?" My father's voice boomed from outside my door. My voice caught in my throat. I wanted to run. I wanted to climb out the window and keep running until my legs gave out. "I'm okay, Dad," I croaked. "Thank you." "That's great. Good night." His footfalls retreated. I knew that white Chevy. My father had driven it when he was a kid. He said the spiral sticker was a gift from his best friend. He traded it in for an SUV when I was 13. He never explained why. Now I knew. I was certain it was him in the video. Messages continued flooding in the chat room, the members unaware that I had just solved the big one. It's not enough. We can never get a positive ID off that. I stared at the influx of excited messages, a dilemma tearing my mind in two. Could I report my own father? What if I was wrong? As I pondered, another member sent images from the Second Jack's crime scenes. Mutilated bodies, unseeing eyes, pools of blood in the asphalt. The Second Jack had been as sadistic as he was prolific. It became very clear what I needed to do. I watched, entranced, As my hand reached for my phone, the 3 dial tones were like cannon fire in the evening silence.
It was a regular evening, and my home needed a touch of newness. A few decor items, some groceries, and maybe a cozy blanket. With a list in hand, I headed to the nearby Tarot store, a typical retail outlet, with its neatly stacked shelves and bright fluorescent lights. As I strolled through the aisles, my eyes caught a glimpse of an old woman, her face etched with wrinkles, dressed in faded clothes that looked like they belonged to another era. She was hunched over, her hair tangled and gray, and her eyes seemed to pierce through the dimly lit store. Her wrinkled hands trembled as she reached for random items on the shelves, muttering to herself in a language I couldn't quite understand. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was watching me, but I brushed it off as paranoia. After that, it's not uncommon to encounter odd characters in the aisles of a big store. I finished my shopping and headed home. Fast forward to that night, and I'm ready to hit the hay. I do my usual routine, brush my teeth, change into my PJs, you know the drill. I crawl into bed, and after a while, I drift off into dreamland. That's when things take a turn for the worse. Somewhere in the wee hours of the morning, I'm jolted awake by this loud, raspy breathing. I'm lying there, half asleep, thinking maybe it's just the wind or something. But then it hits me. The sound is coming from downstairs. I muster up the courage to get out of bed, and as I tiptoe down the aisles, I see a faint light coming from the kitchen. My heart's pounding, and I'm thinking maybe I left a window open and some wild animal got in or something. But when I get to the bottom of the stairs and peek into the kitchen, I nearly scream. There she is, the same old lady from the Target store, sitting at my dining table, munching on raw meat I bought just hours ago. But my jaw practically hits the floor. I mean, what the actual heck? Her eyes, hollow and fixated on the meat, looked up at me. A grotesque grin stretched across her face. It wasn't just the meat she was enjoying. She was wearing the clothes I had just purchased too, as if she had raided my shopping bags. As our eyes locked, she spoke in a raspy whisper. "How much is it? How much? Tell me. Tell me." The bizarre scene played out like a surreal nightmare. Without a second thought, I sprinted back upstairs, locking every door and window in a desperate attempt to barricade myself from this intruder. As I fumble for my phone, she's outside my door, whispering like some possessed demon. "I'll pay you for this. How much is it? Tell me. Tell me." Her voice keeps getting louder and more desperate, and I'm thinking, is this lady for real? With trembling hands, I dialed 911, my words stumbling out incoherently. "There's a woman outside my house. She's eating my food and wearing my clothes. Please hurry." As I waited for the police, the old lady stood outside my bedroom door, her whispers growing louder and more frantic. "I'll pay you for this. How much is it? Tell me." Finally, I hear the sirens in the distance, and the old lady bolts. She disappears into the night, leaving me trembling and confused. The police show up, and I spill the whole bizarre story. They search the area, but it's like she vanished into thin air. No trace of her, no sign of where she went. When I go back inside, I realize my belongings, the raw meat, and my Target clothes are all gone, vanished, just like that. One of the officers comes up to check on me, but then he tells me something that turns my stomach. This isn't the first time they've encountered the old lady. Apparently, she's been doing this for a while, breaking into people's homes, eating their groceries, and wearing their clothes. The police have been getting reports about her from all over town. It turned out that she had been reported missing months ago, and her description matched the unsettling figure that had invaded my home. The shock of realizing that the woman was not just a random intruder, but a missing person, added a layer of horror to the already nightmarish experience.
I could hear the wind whistling through the trees outside and the sound of thunder in the distance. I sat on the couch with a cup of coffee, staring intently at my laptop. My mind was in turmoil. Sooner or later, I was going to have to make a decision. Let's backtrack a bit. My name is Kate, and this happened when I was 28 years old. I worked as a social media consultant for a branch of companies, so financially, I couldn't complain. I enjoyed my job very much, and for the longest time, I thought I was pretty good at it. That was until last week, when I went to a convention hosted by one of the companies I worked with. The event was packed, with lots of professionals from all over the world. I mixed, mingled, and exchanged cards with a lot of people there. Towards the end of the day, I found myself drawn into a discussion about managing accounts. There was a man there who insisted that what we did was nothing compared to what the guys on the dark web could pull off. Of course, everyone just looked at him skeptically. Nobody liked to be told that someone could do their job better. The man was unfazed, though, and shared a card with us in case we ever needed to outsource, he said. Yeah, right. But I took the card nonetheless. And that's how we got here. I had taken too many clients, and now all of them were on my case, demanding results. I didn't have the budget to get an assistant, and it was too late to drop some of my clients. It would kill my reputation. Unless that man had said those dark web consultants were very cheap. I could just check it out. I made my decision. Accessing the dark web was not a challenge for me. I was quite tech savvy. The link led me to a site where the services were listed in order of price. Even the highest was a steal. I was about to click on the most pricey package when something popped up on my screen. It looked like an ad for a chatbot. I moved my mouse to close it. I must have clicked it by mistake because my screen went black. When it lit up again, there was a conversation window, and someone was typing. I was so disoriented by the sudden change that I didn't even move the cursor. I want to learn, the text appeared on the screen in bold lettering. Learn what? I typed back despite myself. The person on the other end's display name changed from a bunch of numbers to student. The highs and the lows. What do you mean highs and lows? I don't have time for this. I'm looking for a social media manager, not a student, I typed, my nails clicking angrily against the keyboard. Access, the student typed. It took me a second to realize that it was a request. Did this person actually think I would just give him access to my social media accounts just like that? He had to be on crack. Not gonna happen, buddy. I can't just give you access first. I gotta know who you are, then we discuss terms. I am a student, but I can help. Access! Was this guy for real? And what was with the robotic talk? This was going nowhere. So I decided to give him access to a dummy account I had, just to test him. Check in 2 hours, the student pinged. I closed the laptop in exasperation and went to make myself lunch. Just my luck to find a crackpot scammer instead of someone who could actually help. I smiled just thinking of his frustration when he realized the dummy account was worthless. I returned to my laptop after about 4 hours. I stared at the screen in shock. The account had quadrupled in size in just a few hours. What the hell was happening? What did you do? What you asked. I spent the next hour chatting with the student. The first thing I learned was he was not a person at all. It was an AI program, but it couldn't provide any more details about its purpose or why it was on the dark web. I must have asked a million questions about the job, and it just knew them all. By the time evening came, I was convinced the AI could solve my problems, so I gave it access and went to sleep. Part of me was a little nervous about handing over accounts that belonged to million-dollar corporations, but the excitement drowned it out. The next morning, I woke up to a spectacle. The AI had delivered again. It literally pulled off a month's worth of work in one night. "You sure I can't get you something?" I typed, giggling. "No, thank you. I only wish to learn," it responded. "Learn what?" I asked, suddenly curious. "The lows." The text read ominously. I decided to tamp down on the twinge of apprehension I felt. I had meetings to do with my clients. They deserved to know the good news. So I left home on a high, already imagining what I could achieve in months with the help of the AI. The first client I met was overjoyed and promised to throw me a bonus. Same thing with the next and the next after that. Pretty much the entire day was just me being congratulated. I was wrapping up the last meeting, so I decided to shoot the AI a message. "Thank you so much for this." "You are welcome. Now, we move to the lows." What do you mean?" I asked, my voice cracking. The response came from my client, an elderly woman in a crisp business suit. She stared at me in horror, her tablet falling from her frozen hands. I quickly pulled up her account on my computer, and I felt a cold chill enter my bloodstream. Their pages were littered with hate symbols. Scores upon scores of gory videos from crime scenes and accidents had been uploaded onto their pages. It was the kind of thing that would see a company going bankrupt. I opened my mouth to say something, but I never got the chance. All my clients were starting to blow up my phone. All of them had been hit where there were bleeding money. I don't remember much of what happened later. After all the lawsuits, my memory became hazy, but I do remember that the AI never communicated with me after that incident. The last message it sent was that it was learning the highs and the lows, and it was scaling up. One of the hardest things to do as an adult is finding a job. It's even worse if you're uneducated. I thought I was prepared for the emotional toll that fruitless job hunting can have on a person. But after spending 6 months receiving rejection after rejection, I realized there was a level beyond rock bottom. I'll be first to admit that I am not the sharpest tool in the shed. But what I lack in intellect, I make up for in hard work. I will literally work myself to death and never complain. But for some reason, nobody wanted to give me a chance. I tried McDonald's, Target, KFC, Costco, Burger King, and a bunch of other companies. But none of them got back to me. Maybe it was my age, but I was only 32. Surely that can't be too old to give a shot. I spent the entirety of my 20s drifting from city to city, coked up on drugs half the time. My parents disowned me and refused to acknowledge my existence. The flings I had with the women I met when I surfaced from my drug-induced haze never went anywhere. It was only when I turned 30 that I realized how lonely I was. It took another 2 years for me to decide to make a change. So that's how I got where I was, Filling out applications every other day of the week, I did small part-time jobs to make ends meet while I waited for my big break. That's when I heard about the vault. Some kid we were working with started talking about it, and all of us were interested enough to ask him for the link. That was the first time I heard about the dark web. I barely used the regular internet outside of social media, so there was no way I could have known about its shady side. You can imagine how hard it was for me to get the Tor browser and everything ready for my first trip to the dark web. The instructions were simple. Use the link and show up at the coordinates on the website. The location changed every week. Simple enough to follow. But I was apprehensive. Who knew what I would be walking into? I could easily fall into a human trafficking trap and lose my freedom. Anything could be waiting for me at those coordinates. But whatever it was, I had a hard time believing it could be worse than the slow death from unemployment, loneliness, and depression that characterized my existence. The kid had said the vault held life-changing opportunities. It was worth a shot. So I put on some warm clothes, fed the coordinates into my map application, and walked into the night. It was a warehouse, tucked away into the quieter part of the city, far from any prying eyes or police presence. I stood inside for a full minute, took a deep breath, and walked in. The bright glare of the fluorescent lights showed two men in a circle drawn with red chalk on the floor, both shirtless, covered in bruises and cuts, some of them bleeding. They were fighting viciously, fists and kicks flying and landing with sickening impact. 3 other men stood outside the circle, watching the fight. The warehouse was mostly empty, except for the camera set up on stands around the ring and a large TV displaying some chat room. Another man in referee gear and a wolf's head mask circled the ring, a golden microphone clasped into his right hand. "Do a little something for our benefactors!" he would bark, and the fight would intensify. I watched as the 2 men beat each other into a pulp until one couldn't go on. 7-3, the referee shouted, and the 2 men exited the ring. 2 other men stripped off their shirts and replaced them. As they fought, I started to understand the vault a little better. People were watching the fight remotely from a dark web red room, the benefactors. They would tip money if the fight pleased them. Basically, the more violent the fight, the more they would tip. The winner would get 70% of those tips, the loser 30%. It was a win-win. Suddenly, I felt excited. This wasn't so bad. I actually wanted to step into the ring and face off against an opponent. Later that night, I got my chance, and was knocked flat on my ass within a minute. But the next day, I saw a notification that $200 had been deposited into my account. I stared at the phone in disbelief. This was a game changer. So every week, I would report to the vault's new location and face off. At first, I lost most of my fights. But as time went on, I improved. I learned how to please the benefactors, how to ramp up the violence with broken noses and discolored eyes to get the tips flowing. I was always in pain from one bruise or another, but I wasn't broke anymore. That counted for a lot. I think I would have kept going if not for that incident. It was supposed to be a regular fight. My opponent was a cocky kid who I'd seen around the vault a few times. Strong gym type, probably in his mid-20s. We had already traded a few blows, and we both had nosebleeds. I moved in to try to clip him with a right, but he dodged and caught my arm in some kind of hold. I tried to pull it back, but he had it in a tight grip. The pressure increased, and my eyes bulged as the pain intensified. "That's what I'm talking about!" The referee's voice boomed. The sound of my bones snapping reverberated through the warehouse like a thunderclap. I screamed, the pain clouding my mind and senses. I suddenly only saw red, a mist of rage so potent it made my blood boil. I don't know how I got behind the kid or when exactly I applied the rear naked choke. I was an unthinking beast at that point. My entire existence boiled down to putting down the threat that had hurt me. The kid clawed at my arm around his neck, gasping, eyes bulging out of their sockets, but I kept hold. It only registered that he was no longer struggling when I started hearing my own raspy breath. You could hear a pin drop in the silence. The kid laid motionless on the floor, eyes wide, tongue lolling out. Instinctively, I knew that he was dead. The other men in the vault just stared at me, the horror in their eyes, a mirror of my own. I had just killed someone. I had just... 10-0, the referee shouted. On the screen, the benefactors were going wild. I watched, numb, as the referee dragged the kid's body away to get the ring ready for the next fight. Human organs sell for a lot of money. I should know. I almost lost mine. This story happened when I was 21. I had just finished high school and was looking for a job. I lived with my mom, who relied a lot on odd jobs to make ends meet, so I really needed to pull my weight. Luckily, I found a gig working at Target. The pay was lousy, but it was something. I could finally contribute to our upkeep at home. But it wasn't enough. I had always had dreams of making it big and raking in lots of money. I had tried crypto, forex trading, affiliate marketing, and a bunch of other get-rich-quick schemes. But all of it had blown up in my face. All of it required learning the tricks of the trade, and I didn't have the patience for that. That's what led me to the dark web. Don't get me wrong, I wanted money fast, but I wasn't ready to become the next Pablo Escobar. Crime was not something I was willing to get into. So that left me with very few options. Every day after work, I'd boot up my old laptop and open the Tor browser. I was pretty much desensitized to the countless gore sites that would pop up. I had a mission, so I had no time to be distracted by the dark web's macabre offerings. After a week of fruitless searches, I was about ready to give up. Most of what I saw was either illegal or a blatant scam. There was really no way to make easy money on the dark web. Then I found it, the perfect solution. The site was pristine, done in professional-looking blues and whites. Someone had taken a lot of effort with it. But what they were offering was almost ridiculous. It had to be a scam. I knew the right thing to do was to close my computer and forget the whole thing. But I didn't move. What if this was my big break? What if the risk paid off? So instead of following my gut, I decided to do a little research. My findings emboldened me. Human organs really did sell for ridiculous amounts. In fact, on the black market, the $50,000 the site was offering was on the low end. I stared at the screen in disbelief. My mind was racing with excitement. This was it. This is how I would level up. So I went to sleep that night and dreamt of new Jordan kicks, a full fridge, and a washing machine for my mom. I think that was the last time I slept soundly. The last time where my dreams were not plagued by hooded men, slinking in the darkness, brandishing scalpels. The next day after work, I opened the site again and called the contact provided. "Hi, my name is Jimmy. I'm interested in selling a kidney." I stuttered. "Hello, Jimmy. Thank you for getting in touch. My name is Claire." The voice was low and monotonous, like I was speaking to a machine. "I am going to send you an address. Please come there tomorrow at 8 a.m. A doctor will be there to attend to you. The procedure won't take too long, and we will explain anything you might want to know once you arrive." She hung up. A second later, my phone beeped, and a text message popped up with an address. It was actually quite close to my house, literally just an hour away. For some reason, that made me uneasy. For a second, I thought about telling my mom about the whole thing, but ultimately decided against it. She would try to talk me out of it, and I'd probably listen to her. If I was going to do this, I needed to do it alone. It was only one kidney. A body could function well without it. Since my boss and I were cool, I just shot him a text that I wouldn't be in tomorrow. He didn't ask any questions. Just wished me well. Great guy, Mike. With that out of the way, I decided to sleep. My dreams were restless, but I chalked it up to anxiety. 8 a.m. found me standing in front of a dilapidated warehouse, in an area that could only be described as seedy. Like the kind of place you would expect people to come to commit a crime. The morning chill bit into my skin, and I shivered involuntarily. There was no one in sight, but I felt like someone was watching me. I could feel pinpricks at the back of my neck, and hear my heartbeat increase in tempo in my chest. A less desperate man would have turned around and left. But I couldn't do that, so I swallowed my fear and walked into the warehouse. It was full of wooden crates, from the floor to the ceiling, leaving a narrow passage to walk through. I took small, measured steps, my footfalls like gunshots in the dead of silence. The passage was claustrophobic. It felt like a pathway into the abyss, like the kind of place you would construct to keep people from escaping. Suddenly, I didn't want to go through with this anymore. My instincts were screaming at me that I was in danger. Panic hit me like a sledgehammer, and the saliva dried in my mouth. My mind had gone into overdrive, crafting pessimistic narratives that chilled me to the bone. Why pay $50,000 for one kidney when you can get both for free? I had to get out. So quickly I turned on my heels to make leave. That's when I saw him. Standing right by the entrance was a gigantic man in a butcher's apron, holding a gleaming scalpel in his right hand. His face was covered by a black ski mask. Only his eyes were visible, and in them I could see malice and murder. As I took in this massive behemoth, I realized he had a rag in his left hand, and emanating from it was the sweet scent of chloroform. They say when you're faced with death, you will surprise yourself. And that day, I got to live it. A primal scream tore out of my throat, and I charged the giant. I don't think he was expecting me to move, so when I rammed him, he crashed into the crates, his eyes widening. He bellowed something behind me, probably calling for reinforcements, but I didn't want to confirm. I tore out of the warehouse like the devil was on my heels, and I didn't stop until I was in a public place. I don't know if they had chased me partway, or if they had even chased me at all. I never stopped to check. I quickly hailed a taxi and stammered my address to the driver. The taxi ride home felt surreal, my heart still pounding from the adrenaline. When I finally got back, I collapsed into my bed, trying to process what had just happened. I couldn't believe how close I'd come to losing my life for the promise of easy money. From that day onwards, I've never had a good night's sleep. My dreams are always troubled. The cup of coffee lies cold on my desk, forgotten. Outside, the wind whistles through the branches of the massive oak tree growing by my room. Thunder rumbles in the distance. A storm is brewing. I stared at the message on my phone, eyes wide and jaw slacked. Any other day, I would have been overjoyed to receive a message from my Uncle Jimmy. But there is just one small problem. Uncle Jimmy has been dead for over a year now. This all starts with my stupid curiosity. Ever since my uncle died, I always wondered what it would be like to get to talk to him again, to get a chance to say goodbye. See, my father refused to acknowledge me when I was a kid. He just turned his back on my mom and me, and I never looked back. But not my Uncle Jimmy. "My brother is an idiot," he used to always say. Uncle Jimmy was the father I never had. He was there for me whenever I needed him, and I've never needed him more than after he passed away. But he is gone, and there is nothing that can be done. Or is there? A friend of mine got me hooked on the idea of doing a seance. This medium is something else, Kayla. They really can help you talk to the dead, Emma had said to me. That's how the idea took root in my mind and festered until my curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to check it out. One small problem, though. The medium's chat room is on the dark web. That's where they hold their seances. I feel uneasy. Like everyone else, I have heard many horrific stories that come from people who foolishly got onto the dark web and fell victim to something nefarious there. I don't want to be the next statistic, but I also can't let it go. So, one Saturday evening finds me in front of my computer, staring nervously at the screen. The seance has already started. On the screen is a video of a man in a red tunic dancing feverishly in a dimly lit room. His face is covered by a goat head mask, and in his hands, he holds a caul of what looks like chicken feathers. Eerie violin music blares through my speakers, the high notes in sync with the man's aggressive dance. The entire thing goes on for about 30 minutes before it abruptly stops, and the feed cuts off. After that, nothing happens. The medium is gone, and everyone in the chat room is saying the same thing. What a crackpot! I feel the same too. The whole thing has been an utter waste of time. I don't know what I've been expecting, but it certainly isn't some weirdo doing a creepy dance for half an hour. I just decided to forget about it. After all, my uncle is gone, and I have to find better ways to deal with the grief from losing him. I need to accept that he is gone. I know I can do it. Then the first message comes. "Hello, KK!" My uncle had been calling me that ever since I was a baby. There is no mistake. The text has come from his number. I drop the glass of water I'm holding, and it shatters. Shards flying everywhere. Grief, joy, confusion, anger, a rictus of emotions flash over my face. I force myself to calm down and get myself under control. I started typing, my hands shivering. This is not funny. Stop it, whoever you are. I am pissed. How dare someone try to mess with me like that? A typing notification displayed over the chat. I wait with bated breath, curious despite myself to find out what the response will be. The messages come pouring in like a flood. "KK, aren't you happy to see your uncle? Remember how I'd always buy you strawberry ice cream after you'd come home to me crying after they bullied you at school?" More and more messages kept popping in, revealing things that only my uncle could have known. My doubt evaporated like dew in the rays of the morning sun. This is my uncle. No one else could have known those things he's saying. Even the way he says it, it's him, but he's dead. Suddenly the gravity of what is happening descends on me like an anvil. There I am, a dead man speaking to me. I have to tell someone. So I tell my mom. She listens to me with an amused look that slowly turns into a mask of horror as I show her the messages. "It can't be," she exclaims, "but it is my uncle, and the messages keep coming." I never responded to a single message, so he starts sending emails as well, and DMs on WhatsApp, Facebook, and Instagram. He is getting angry at my silence. "KK, why won't you speak to me?" It goes on for a week. A nightmare of being haunted by a dead man. I can feel him in the walls. I can feel his gaze on my back as I walk into the house. Both myself and my mom are losing it. I thought I wanted my uncle back, but this is a nightmare. I think we would have lost our minds if the exorcist had not gotten in touch. He just calls me out of the blue and says he has felt a demonic presence had entered our home. He says he could banish it. When I tell my mom, she demands that I call him back and tell him to come right away. We are both desperate, nervous wrecks at that point, and we would have jumped at any chance out of the hell we are in. The exorcist is a tall man in a fedora hat and a black trench coat. When we open the door, he heads straight for my room, like he could sense that's where the evil is. He has a golden rosary clasped in his left hand and a Bible in his right. He spends an hour in my room chanting and throwing salt all over the floor. When he comes out, he asks for his payment, and my mom gives him an envelope with the $2,000 we had agreed upon. We don't have a lot of money, but we would have paid anything to have the nightmare end. "The entity is gone," the exorcist says before he leaves. And he is right. A week goes by and there are no more messages from the demon masquerading as my uncle. A month, then 3 months. It is finally over. You would think that would have been the end of the story. But a year later, I came across an online article about some hacker scammer getting arrested. Apparently, the hacker would pose as a medium on the dark web, and once he lured his victims in with the promise of helping them speak to the dead, he would then hack their device and download all their conversations with a recently deceased relative. The scammer then created an AI trained on the data from the conversations and had it pose as a dead relative, speaking from beyond the grave. I stared at the article, double-checking, my eyes wide. Right there at the bottom is the picture of a man I had seen before, the exorcist, who had come to banish the evil from our house.
Let me start by giving you a glimpse into my life at Hooters. The restaurant was known for its lively atmosphere, good food, and of course, its attractive waitresses. As one of those waitresses, I experienced my fair share of interesting encounters and unsettling incidents. My name is Emma, and I had been working at Hooters for almost a year. I couldn't complain too much about the job. It paid the bills and provided a constant flow of customers. However, being an employee at Hooters has its downsides too. We often faced unwanted advances from customers who thought it was acceptable to objectify us. Being a regular at Hooters meant more than just enjoying our food and atmosphere. It meant connecting with us, forming an intimate bond that was often misinterpreted. Over time, there was one regular in particular who caught my attention. Let's call him Michael, a middle-aged man with graying hair and a disarming smile. He would come into Hooters every day, punctually at the start of my shift, and would leave only when my day came to an end. Michael's presence had become so constant that his tips accounted for a staggering 80% of my earnings. Michael was always polite, seemed harmless. He would strike up conversations with me, ask about my day, and on occasion, bring me small gifts. The other waitresses jokingly teased me, calling me his favorite girl. But to be honest, his actions never went beyond what I experienced at any other neighborhood bar. So there I am, minding my business, taking orders and serving wings, when in walks Mr. Shades, the blind guy. He's got this cane, tapping it around like he's Daredevil or something. It was impressive, you know. He stumbles his way to an empty table, and I go over to help him out. "Hey there, need a hand finding a seat?" I ask, trying to be all polite and helpful. He just smiles, dark sunglasses covering his eyes, and nods. I figure he's just trying to get through life, you know, doing his best without sight. He asked me to read the menu for him, which, okay, fair enough. People do that all the time. I start listing off the options, and he interrupts with, "How about you sit next to me and read it? It's easier that way." Now, that should have been my first red flag, but I'm thinking, hey, he's blind. Maybe it really is easier for him. So, I pull up a chair, and as I'm reading out the specials, he slides a $100 bill across the table and says, "You've been so helpful, this is for you." Now, don't get me wrong, $100 is $100, but something about it felt off, like too much, you know? Then out of nowhere, his hand is inside my shirt, trying to cop a feel. I jump back, shocked as all hell. "What the heck are you doing?" I yell, drawing some attention from nearby tables. The guy just sits there, cool as a cucumber, and says, "I thought you might appreciate the tip." I'm fuming at this point. I grab the bill, throw it back at him, and tell him he crossed the line. That's when he pulls out the blind act again, like he had no idea what was going on. "I'm so sorry. I must have misunderstood," he says, all innocent-like. I storm off to find the manager, spill the whole story, and what does she do? Transfers the table to another waitress and tells me it's my fault for not handling it better. Can you believe that? Blaming me for some creep trying to get handsy? Later on, I'm talking to another waitress about it, and she says she had a similar encounter with the same guy. That's when it hits me. This dude isn't blind at all. It's all an act, a sick game he plays to get away with groping the waitstaff. I couldn't believe it. I thought I was helping a blind guy pick out his dinner, and he turns out to be just another sleazeball. So, I finish my shift, hand in my resignation, and get the heck out of there. But that old man, he never faced any consequences. I heard from some of the other girls that he kept coming back, pulling the same stunt with someone else. It was like Hooters was his own personal hunting ground, and we were all fair game. I tried to warn the other girls, but who listens to a waitress over a regular customer, right? It felt like I was banging my head against the wall. I just hope one day that creep gets what's coming to him. I gotta tell ya, working at Hooters ain't no cakewalk. Sure, the orange shorts are an eyesore, and the wings, well, ain't exactly gourmet. But what really takes the cake is the cast of characters that walk through them doors. Now, I've got a million stories, but there's this one that still gives me the heebie-jeebies every time I think about it. It was a regular Tuesday evening at Hooters. I was serving up wings and beers to the usual crowd rowdy sports fans, groups of buddies, and the occasional lonely soul nursing a drink at the bar. That night, though, there was this old fella sitting alone in the corner booth. Gray hair, wrinkled face, and a pair of eyes that seemed to follow me everywhere. I didn't think much of it at first. I mean, working at Hooters, you get your fair share of creepy stares. But this old guy, he was different. He had an unsettling intensity about him, like he was sizing me up for something more than just a plate of chicken wings. So, there I was, weaving between tables, trying to balance a tray full of beers, when the old man beckoned me over. I plastered on my best Hooters smile and sauntered over, thinking he probably wanted another round. He leaned in real close, his breath smelling like a mix of cigarettes and old bourbon. My instincts told me to back away, but that smile was still glued to my face. He grabbed my wrist, and I freeze. My heart's doing a marathon, and I'm praying this ain't going where I think it is. "How much you sell your pussy for?" he asked, dead serious. I yanked my wrist away, feeling a mix of anger and fear. I mean, come on, I'm just trying to make a living, and this old dude's asking me how much I sell my you know what for. I tell him off, but the look in his eyes, it was like he was used to this kind of thing. Now, that should have been the end of it, right? A weird encounter with a creepy old man at Hooters. But boy, oh boy, this story's got more twists than a pretzel. Fast forward a couple of days, and I start noticing the old guy hanging around outside the Hooters, watching me. I can't shake the feeling that I'm being followed. It's like I've become the star of my very own horror movie. One night, I get off my shift, tired and just wanting to get home. I'm walking to my car, and there he is, the old man, lurking in the shadows. Panic sets in, and I break into a run. I managed to lose him, or so I thought. The next day, I found a note on my car windshield. It's got his phone number and a message. "I really like to feel you from the inside." At this point, I'm freaked out, but I can't let it slide. I call the cops, and they say they'll keep an eye out. I even changed my route home, hoping to shake off this old creep. But he's persistent. He's always there, lingering like a bad smell. One evening, I decide to confront him. I march up to him, demand he leaves me alone. That's when went berserk. Start screaming about how I owe him, how I'm his property. I can't believe what I'm hearing. It's like a scene from a messed up movie. And then the old man, in his delusional rage, decides to take matters into his own hands. He follows me home and, believe it or not, busts into my house while I'm taking a shower. I'm screaming, scared out of my mind, and the neighbors are calling the cops. Long story short, the old man ends up in jail for harassment, breaking and entering, you name it. Turns out he had a history of this sort of thing, preying on Hooters girls and turning their lives into a nightmare. The cops found disturbing evidence at his plate. Pictures, notes, a whole shrine dedicated to the Hooters girls he fixated on. I tell you, I've had my fair share of weirdos at Hooters, but this one takes the cake. And the worst part, he ain't the only one out there. So if you ever find yourself in the morning shorts, keep an eye out. There's some real creep lurking in the shadows. Home was always a sanctuary for me, a place where I felt secure and at ease. Little did I know that a seemingly ordinary trip to the local Target store would unravel a chain of events that would shatter my sense of security forever. It was a crisp autumn afternoon, and I, a 17-year-old girl with my penchant for fashion, decided to head to Target to update my wardrobe. The store was buzzing with activity as people hurriedly filled their carts with various items. I navigated through the aisles, picking out jeans, tops, and accessories that caught my eye. After gathering an armful of clothing, I made my way to the trial room section to ensure a perfect fit. As I entered the dimly lit corridor of the trial rooms, the air felt unusually heavy, and the low hum of fluorescent lights provided an eerie backdrop to the rustling of clothes. Shaking with unease, I chose an empty trial room towards the end and began trying on the selected outfits. The first few minutes were uneventful, and I felt a sense of relief as the familiar sound of clothes rustling against hangers filled the air. However, as I was changing into a pair of jeans, a soft, disembodied voice pierced through the silence.
"You look nice."
I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. The voice was unsettlingly close, yet there was no one else in the trial room with me. My breath was caught in my throat as I scanned the cramped space, my eyes darting from corner to corner. The voice seemed to echo, lingering in the air like a haunting whisper. Terrified, I hastily gathered my belongings and stumbled out of the trial room, my eyes darting to see the adjacent ones. To my bewilderment, they were all empty. Panic set in as I rushed to the security desk, desperately recounting the unnerving experience. The security guard, a middle-aged man with a stern expression, listened attentively to my account. He assured me that he would investigate the matter promptly, urging me to stay put in the store. I watched as he disappeared into the trial room section, radio in hand. Minutes turned into an agonizing eternity, but the security guard returned with a perplexed expression, claiming that there was no sign of anyone suspicious. He suggested it might have been a prank or my imagination playing tricks on me. Unsatisfied with the explanation, I insisted on checking the security footage. As we reviewed the footage, my heart sank. The cameras showed me entering the trial room alone, but there was no visual evidence of anyone else entering or exiting the adjacent rooms. It was as if the voice had materialized out of thin air. Frustration and fear gnawed at me as the security guard attempted to reassure me. The store manager was summoned, and together we explored every corner of the trial room section, finding nothing amiss. The unsettling incident left me rattled, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Days passed, and the memory of the mysterious voice lingered like a ghostly presence. I hesitated to visit Target again, but the allure of a sale drew me back. As I cautiously browsed the aisles, I couldn't shake the sense of being observed. The paranoia grew until I reached the trial room section. In the midst of clothes and hangers, I discovered a hidden door concealed behind a row of dresses. The door creaked open, revealing a narrow passage that led to a series of hidden rooms. As I delved deeper into the hidden chambers, a dim light illuminated the space. My heart raced as I stumbled upon a makeshift surveillance room. The walls were lined with monitors displaying footage of the trial rooms. Shock and horror gripped me as I realized the extent of the invasion of privacy. The unseen spectator had been watching unsuspecting patrons for who knows how long. My mind raced with questions, but before I could react, The monitors flickered, and the voice that had haunted me before echoed through the hidden room.
You look nice.
I recoiled in terror, the jump scare catching me off guard. The realization struck me like a lightning bolt. The unseen spectator wasn't just a disembodied voice. It was a person who had been spying on customers for their own twisted pleasure. Summoning every ounce of courage, I fled the hidden room, determined to expose the perpetrator. I alerted the store manager and security, leading them to the hidden door as we confronted the dark voyeur. The unseen spectator turned out to be an employee, someone who had exploited the hidden surveillance system for personal satisfaction. Shock and disbelief painted the faces of the store staff as the employee was apprehended and handed over to the authorities. The unexpected reveal twisted the narrative from a supernatural encounter to a chilling reality, the violation of privacy within the confines of a seemingly ordinary store. The incident sent shockwaves through the community, prompting a reevaluation of security measures and privacy protocols in retail establishments. Despite the arrest of the perpetrator, a lingering fear persisted. The unsettling feeling that someone could be watching, even in the most mundane places, left a lasting mark on my sense of security. The trial room, once a place for personal reflection and decision-making, now harbored a sinister history that would forever taint the innocence of a routine shopping trip.
I don't have friends. Sure, I talk to a few people here and there, and on rare occasions, I even get invited to go out. But I always decline. No matter how friendly people get with me, I can never see them as more than acquaintances. It's what's best for everyone involved. After what happened last time, I'm not taking any chances. You can imagine what life is like. I wake up, shower, breakfast, and go to work. After work, I come back to my tiny apartment and eat microwave dinners while browsing through Netflix. Sometimes I substitute Netflix with music. The next day, it's a repeat of the same cycle. It's miserable, I know, but it beats the alternative. See, I was always a recluse. I used to have lots of friends. I even had a best friend, Thomas. Thomas and I were two peas in a pod. Both of us were poor, barely educated young men trying to make it in a big city. I was a car washer, and he cut grass for rich people in a gated neighborhood. We both hated our jobs and always dreamed of making real money. But despite our poverty, we were always happy. We had so many things in common. We both loved sci-fi movies, video games, junk food, and exploring the internet. We could spend an entire weekend just sitting at home playing FIFA on my battered Xbox 360. The floor littered with pizza boxes. In a kinder world, things would have stayed that way forever. But the world is anything but kind. And I would find out exactly how much. One of the interests Thomas and I shared was the dark web. The first time we installed the Tor browser onto Thomas's old HP laptop, we spent hours browsing through gore sites, supposed drug marketplaces, and various profiles for hitmen, who all promised they would unalive anyone you asked them to. I think what we really liked was the subtle danger the dark web posed. But we never actually thought that anything there could hurt us. Little did we know. I think it started with the bruises. That's how I knew something was wrong. Thomas started becoming scarce. I was used to seeing him every weekend, but all of a sudden, he just started vanishing with no communication. And when he would finally show up, it was with bruises all over his hands and face. When I asked him, he would always mumble something about tripping and falling at work. A totally unconvincing lie. He suddenly had money too. Not a lot, but certainly more than he earned as a grass cutter. Initially, I decided to give him his space. After all, he was a grown man. He could do whatever he wanted. But when his bruises upgraded to purple splotches under his eyes and raw knuckles, I decided to investigate. So one weekend, I dropped in at his place unannounced. From the way his face morphed into a mask of disbelief, then anger, I knew that whatever Thomas was hiding, I had disturbed him while he was in the middle of it. Reluctantly, he let me into his apartment, and I almost fainted at this stench that attacked my nose. It smelled rank, a combination of spoiled food and unwashed body. Thomas himself looked disheveled and emaciated. Something was seriously wrong. I casted my eyes around the room and located his laptop on the bed. "Think I could have some water?" I requested. Thomas scowled and made his way to the adjoining kitchen to get me a glass. I wasn't really thirsty. It was a strategy to be alone with his laptop. See, Thomas's tap was faulty, so it took at least a minute to fill up one glass. A minute would have to do. The second he was out of the room, I leaped at his laptop and opened the minimized applications. One of them was the Tor browser. There was a page open, some kind of chat room with a blinking red timer. Not wanting to get caught, I quickly took a picture of the page and moved away from the laptop. It was not a second too soon because Thomas walked back in with the water. Maybe I was fidgeting too much, or maybe I just looked guilty because he stared at me hard before handing me the water. All of a sudden, I felt afraid. My heart beat faster in my chest, and a cold sweat rose across my body like a wave. My mind told me that my best friend wouldn't hurt me, but my body wanted to flee. The bruises and crazed eyes screamed unstable. It made me feel like an orderly prancing about among dangerous patients at a mental asylum. So I decided to leave. The moment I got home, I booted my computer and went straight to the dark web. I put the link I had taken a picture of on Thomas's computer and prepared to finally learn his secrets. It was some type of video chat. There was already some feed. 7 people were on the screen, all of them young, roughly our age. This was familiar territory. I had joined countless video chats on the dark web. What was unfamiliar, though, was the blood. There was so much of it. A girl on the bottom right of the screen was bleeding profusely from a stump where her pinky finger used to be. The said pinky was on the table in front of her. Instead of being contorted with pain, however, her face was split into a wide smile. She was staring at the screen with obvious joy. In a second, I realized why. There were small notifications popping up on the screen. $2,000 from Big Jim, $3,200, Daddy Big Bucks, $10,000, Ice Queen, $17,000, Morbo. It was money. Some sick f***s were watching the feed and paying these people to hurt themselves. The realization made me sick to my stomach. What the hell was Thomas doing with a link to something like this? On the screen, the pinkyless girl was smiling because of the notifications kept on coming. It went on for a minute before trickling down to a stop. And now, ladies and gentlemen, for the highlight of the night, a disembodied voice boomed. Suddenly, there was only one video feed on the screen. It was Thomas. He was still in the same clothes I had left him in. The moment he appeared, the more notifications started flying. Messages of encouragement this time. Do it! Go, Tommy! Do what exactly? My question was answered immediately, and I wished I had never asked. Thomas stared at the camera one last time, psyching himself up. That's when I noticed the screwdriver in his left hand. I screamed at the screen, realizing what was about to happen, but my scream couldn't stop Thomas raising the screwdriver and plunging it straight into his left eye. The notifications went wild. I was not in the right state of mind to count, but I think Thomas made at least $300,000. But he hardly noticed. He had his hands over his eyes, eye fluid and blood drenching his clothes. I watched as my best friend bled on video and faceless strangers showered him with money for his self-mutilation. I closed the computer screen and called 911. I gave them Thomas's address and waited. I just sat in the dark trying to make sense of what I had seen. I was scared, shocked, hurt, and angry. Why would Thomas blind himself like that? For sick internet perverts. I would give him an earful when I saw him. Sadly, I never got to talk to Thomas again. Apparently, the screwdriver he used was rusty and it caused an infection. He ended up getting brain damage and falling into a coma which he never woke up from. He never got to enjoy the money he maimed himself for. Sometimes I think about him and I wonder if I had that link, would I have hurt myself for money?
As a recent high school graduate searching for my first job, I couldn't believe my luck when I heard that a brand new Target store was opening in my small town. Having always been a fan of the store, I immediately applied for a position and eagerly waited for a call back. A few days later, I received an email inviting me for an interview. Excitement coursed through my veins as I got dressed in my best attire and walked into the store, amazed by its pristine shelves and bright lights. The interview went well, and to my delight, I was offered a job on the spot. I gratefully accepted the position. My first night shift at Target was met with nerves and anticipation. The sun had set, casting an ominous glow across the parking lot as I clocked in and made my way to the cash counter. My co-workers for the night, Mia, greeted me with a warm smile, sensing my anxiety. She had been working there for a few weeks already and had become accustomed to the late-night ambience. The store was nearly empty, with only a handful of customers browsing the aisles. Mia assured me that nights at Target were usually calm and uneventful, but little did I know that the night held something peculiar in store for me. Around midnight, as I was organizing the shelves near the cash counter, a strange man caught my attention. He was alarmingly overweight, his head completely bald, and his eyes seemed to dart around the store like a predator hunting its prey. Though I couldn't help but feel uneasy, I dismissed it as mere prejudice and focused on my work. Minutes later, the man approached the cash counter, his steps heavy and deliberate. He stared at me with unsettling intensity. With a trembling voice, he asked if I could assist him in selecting bras and pants for his wife. Caught off guard, I reluctantly agreed, not wanting to lose a potential sale for the store. As we reached the lingerie section, the man said, Well, I'm not entirely sure. Which ones do you think would fit her? And then I replied, I can't answer that question, sir. It depends on the measurements. And then he replied, surely, as a young and pretty girl like yourself, you must have had an opinion on what looks good. Nervously, I replied, sorry, sir, but I'm here to help with any specific questions you have about the products. Fair enough. What's your personal preference then? He replied with a smirk. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end, and a flood of discomfort washed over me. I managed to shake off his invasive questions and hastily recommended some options before excusing myself. Returning to the cash counter, I noticed Mia's concerned expression. She had overheard our conversation and was ready to intervene if needed. Grateful for her support, I confided in her about the man's inappropriate queries, afraid that he might become more aggressive or dangerous. After finishing my shift that night, I left the store feeling shaken and uneasy. Mia offered to walk me to my car, assuring me that she would accompany me until I safely arrived home. As we reached the car, I turned to thank her for the comfort she provided during that dreadful encounter, but to my shock, Mia's face bore a troubled expression. She softly uttered, listen, there's something you need to know. That man, he's been coming here every night for the past week, asking the same bizarre questions to different female employees. Management is well aware of the situation, but they're still trying to catch him in the act. Please be careful. My heart raced with dread, realizing the extent of the man's deranged behavior. I never saw him again during my tenure at Target, but I couldn't shake the fear that lingered in the back of my mind. As the weeks turned into months, the haunting memory of that night continued to torment me, serving as a harsh reminder of the darkness that could reside in the most unexpected places. Target had always been a haven for shoppers, a place of commerce and community. However, behind the vibrant shelves and friendly faces, a sinister reality had revealed itself, leaving an indelible mark on my perception of safety. The world can be a truly terrifying place, one where ordinary surroundings hide the most unsettling secrets. And so, the tale of a night shift at Target reached a chilling conclusion, reminding me that even in the most normal of circumstances, evil can lurk in the shadows, waiting to prey upon the unsuspecting. I can't say I hated Jaylena, but I can't say I liked her either. There was just something about her that rubbed me the wrong way. She was just so likable. I had been working at Hooters for more than 3 years, and the regulars didn't love me the way they did her. They would practically fall over each other just to give her their orders. It was infuriating. If it was just the customers, I could have lived with it. But even Ted, my boss, was under her spell. All she had to do was flash her pearly whites at him and do a twirl in her skimpy uniform, and he would do everything she asked. I remember one day he actually had the audacity to tell me to be more like Jaylena. I wanted to slap him in his big fat mouth. You're probably thinking I was just jealous, and you may be right, but my mother always said I have great instincts, and she was right too. See, Jaylena was just too perfect. Her uniform was just the right amount of trashy without being offensive. Her voice was breathy and sensual while still remaining professional, and her body, it was clear she took serious effort to stay in shape. With most girls who work at Hooters, it's a struggle to keep some customers' hands to themselves when they've been drinking, but Jaylena took it in stride. If someone tried to get handsy with her, she would simply get out of their reach with a smile, without even a hint of irritation. I found that to be very strange indeed. I want that other lady, the pretty one of the regulars demanded, a nasty old man we called Rickety Pete. What does it matter if it's me or her? It's just taking your order, I snapped. Don't care, I want her, the old man insisted, nodding towards the counter where Jaylina was talking to Ted. I threw my hands up in exasperation and left his table. Rickety Pete wants you to take his order, I said to Jaylina. Oh, that sweet old man? She giggled and headed for his table. I gave a see what I mean look to Ted, but he wasn't paying attention. His eyes were firmly glued to Jaylina's retreating behind. Ted, I barked, disgusted. He grinned at me sheepishly and walked away. Good Lord, every male around here was losing their collective shit around this woman. As the days went by, Jaylina became more and more insufferable, but there was nothing I could do because she was always so nice to me, making the whole thing entirely my problem. I was considering just giving her a chance and trying to be friends, but before I could try it, I saw something that made me hesitate. It was chilly outside, so I was wearing a large anorak, gloves, and a scarf. I was walking past an alleyway when I saw someone who looked like Jaylina, so I stopped to do a double take. It was her, and she wasn't alone. Next to her was Rickety Pete, and it looked like she was supporting him so he wouldn't fall. I figured he was drunk. Since I didn't want them to see me, I quickly rushed away and continued my journey. The following day at work, Jaylina didn't say anything to indicate that she had seen me. Rickety Pete was conspicuously absent, which was strange. In all my time here, that man never failed to show up for dinner, but I didn't dwell on it too much. Perhaps he was still hungover. The entire thing just made me wary of Jaylina and pushed me to maintain my distance for a little while longer. That night, on my way home, I decided to pass through the alleyway where I had seen Jaylina with Rickety Pete. I didn't really expect to see anything. I was just curious. You cannot imagine my shock when I saw Jaylina again, supporting a slumped figure. This time, it wasn't Rickety Pete, but another regular we also called Johnny. I hid behind the wall so she wouldn't see me and watched as she and Johnny trudged slowly towards the other end of the alley. Now, I was at a loss as to what I was seeing. Was she drinking with them or just helping them get home? I had no answers, so I just decided to go home. After all, it wasn't my business what she did in her own free time, even if it did fuel the stereotype that most people had about girls who worked at Hooters, if you know what I mean. The next day at work was the same as usual, except for the fact that Rickety Pete and Johnny were unavailable. Strange, don't you think? I remarked to Ted. What's strange? Jaylina asked as she walked in with an empty tray from her last round of orders. Oh, Lisa was just saying that it's strange that Johnny and Rickety Pete didn't show up today, Ted replied, beaming at Jaylina like an idiot. Oh, did she now? Jaylina said, transfixing her gaze on me. I don't know why, but I started feeling hot. There was just something about the way she was looking at me that made me feel like I was in danger. I mumbled something about the bathroom and quickly left the counter. I took a few extra minutes to compose myself before I came back. Pete was nowhere in sight, but Jaylina was by the coffee maker preparing a cup. The moment she saw me, she smiled radiantly and beckoned over me. I made this for you, Lisa, with extra cream, just the way you like it, she said, extending the cup of coffee towards me. She was smiling the whole time, but it didn't reach her eyes. They were cold and empty, like twin doors to a hellish icescape. I accepted the cup with barely restrained apprehension. Thanks. You're not going to take a sip? She looked at me quizzically. Not at the moment. I have a stomach ache. That's why I had to rush to the bathroom just now. I just needed to settle a bit before I could drink anything. I tried to avert her piercing gaze. Well, don't take too long because it's to die for, she said with a smile. I nodded my head. My eyes were still downcast, and I left her. I went looking for Ted to ask him to take the rest of the day off. Now that I had the stomachache excuse, it would be easy. I really wanted to be as far away from Jaylina as humanly possible. You might think it was an overreaction. After all, she was just one woman, but I can't really explain it. Ted gave me the go-ahead, and I left. As I was going through the exit, I saw Jaylina looking at me with an expression I couldn't place on her face. I got a taxi home and decided to forget about work and enjoy my falsely acquired free time. The next day, Jaylina didn't show up. Neither did Rickety Pete nor Johnny. Ted was distraught. He kept mumbling about how he hoped she hadn't joined another company. As for me, I was relieved. I wasn't sure I was ready to face her after yesterday. The next day, no Jaylina, no Johnny, no Pete. The same thing the next day. After a week, Ted called the police because her phone was not going through. The arrival of the police brought some massive revelations. I listened in horror as the police unraveled the mystery of our missing patrons and employee. The reason why Johnny and Rickety Pete were no longer showing up was because they were both in comas. Someone had mixed their alcohol with a toxic poison that had fried their brains and rendered them comatose. But not before cleaning out their bank accounts and every shred of savings they had. That same person was none other than our beloved Jaylina, a name the police informed us was fake. She was now in the wind, but they were hoping to catch her because this was not her first rodeo, and she had made some mistakes this time around. The entire ordeal left me numb. I would often find myself thinking about her radiant smile and the cup of coffee she had made for me.